Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the first Bow Valley Nonprofit Speaker Series. Joining us today is Emily Bocking, a consultant with KEA Canada. Emily has over 14 years of experience in philanthropy and focuses on reinvigorating fundraising programs for organizations, working with volunteers and boards, and executing fundraising campaigns for programs and capital projects. Today, Emily is going to share her insights on how to research and apply for nonprofit grants. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few webinar housekeeping tips. If during today's webinar you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the webinar comments box at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of Emily's presentation, so make sure you stick around for that. At the end of the webinar, there will be a short 3-question survey. Please fill this in to help inform future sessions. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be available at the Bow Valley Nonprofits website under the training page. You'll also find information about future webinar events there. Last but certainly not least, thank you to the towns of Banff and Canmore for making this speaker series possible. My name's Moselle Dibden, and I'll be moderating the questions today. Now let's welcome Emily.
Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you all and to be here today. I'm excited to be able to share my knowledge about grant making and how to be more successful with grants. Oops, sorry guys, I just need to get this going. There we go. As Moselle said, my name's Emily Bocking. I have been with KEA Canada now for about 2 years, and I've got about 14 years of experience in philanthropy. A large chunk of my experience is related to major gifts and capital campaigns, but the roots of my career actually started in foundation proposals and in donor relations. For the past 3 years now, I've been working pretty exclusively on securing major grants and making requests to foundations. And I'm here today to tell you more about how that work has gone and share some tips and tricks with you. The session goals are not coming up right now. There we go. So we're going to look at doing a bit of a top 10 list. We're going to talk about researching and applying for grants. Granting basics, so what you need to know before you start, some grant writing 101, and finance for grants, so how to leverage what you have and get what you need to support your organization. It's not moving, weird. So let's set the scene. We all know that we're living through some pretty extraordinary times, and that is certainly reflected right now in the grant landscape. So with COVID, we're seeing that government is spending a lot more money. The recent budget that was announced has significant opportunities, and I expect that those will be reflected in granting opportunities soon. We're going to be seeing a lot more programs that are focused on trust-based granting instead of the project-based granting that we've been seeing. We're also watching corporations quite closely. There are some that are doing really well, and there are some that aren't. And so corporations themselves are dealing with economic uncertainty and pressing needs, and they may be moving away from their traditional areas of support and are instead shifting towards supporting COVID relief efforts. There is a growing awareness, and this is fantastic news, of the importance of overhead in budgets. And we're starting to see the government understand the importance of funding overhead and administrative costs for projects. And the last thing is that everyone is looking for funding. So there is lots more increased competition out there and a lot more people looking for funding. there. So the first thing I wanted to tell you, and the first lesson, is that no one is 100% successful. Give yourself a break and realize that there are things that are totally outside of your control right now. Funders may not choose your grant, not because your project isn't amazing or awesome. They may choose your grant or not choose your grant because they're just so oversubscribed and they have to make some tough choices. The other thing to know with this is that it very much is a numbers game. It's important to realize that it's not your fault, right? It's just not your fault as an organization if you're not secure on this grant, but you may be secured on the next grant. And so it's important to keep looking forward. This is our grant success. This is KEA Canada's success. So you'll see in 2019 to 2020, we wrote 11 grants. We were successful 7 times. We applied for $2 million and we received about $1 million. So it was a 63% success rate for number of grants and about 51% for number of dollars. Last year, we did 16 grants. We were successful 12 times. We had 2.9 million in total asks, secured 1.6, which works out to a 75% success rate and 56% of dollars. One thing that I really want to make clear is that these figures do not count all of the letters of the LOIs that we had to write. It doesn't count the number of introductory meetings that we had with various organizations where we've decided, you know what, like it's not, this isn't the right fit and our likelihood of being successful is fairly slim. I would actually revise down these numbers by about 20% in that case. If I were to include those, I would say we were successful about 55% of the time. So just keep that in mind. The second lesson is to do your research. So think of yourself kind of as Christopher Columbus going out into the world trying to find new land, but in this case, new grants. Don't expect grants to come to you. It would be lovely if they did, but for the most part, they won't. You have to go searching for those. And, and there's lots of places to look. There's lots of ways to look for grants. There's, sorry guys, this is just so slow. There we go. So here are some ways to find grant opportunities. So the first one is to look for some free tools. Some ways to do that is to go to public libraries. Usually a library will have the Grant Connect database, which belongs to Imagine Canada. You can join mailing lists for philanthropic foundations of Canada, community foundations of Canada. You can start monitoring government granting programs, which could be at the provincial level or the federal level. You can join grant-making organization mailing lists. So Ontario Nonprofit Network would be an example. Obviously, the Bow Valley Nonprofit Network would also be an example. CCVO, which is Calgary Chamber of Voluntary Organizations, is a good option. And Alberta Nonprofit Network would also be an opportunity. One strange thing is that lots of grant-making organizations actually make announcements on Twitter. And so that's one place where I tend to monitor, and I'll find new granting opportunities or new launches or news about some of the programs. And then the last thing you could do, frankly, is to check similar organizations for funding opportunities. So who does similar work to what you're doing and who have they worked with? Usually funders or programs will recognize some of their donors. And so it's a bit of a sneaky way to see where maybe some funding could be. The last thing you can do is purchase some tools or support. There's lots of databases that are out there, and some of them have 30-day trials. So you can try them out and see if it works for your organization. Some of those costs are prohibitive though, and so Another way is to purchase support through a consulting group like KEA Canada or others who may be able to do that work for you a little bit faster and provide a good list.
Let's just practice your presentation.
There we go. So when you're looking for grant making organizations, the first thing you want to do is you get into your database and you have to ask yourself, like, what is the primary positive outcome of my project or my organization? What's the secondary and what's the tertiary positive outcome? And the reason why you're asking this is because your project will normally have more than one benefit. And you want to make sure that you get as many grantors as you possibly can. So with a project that we worked with, it was about saving this chunk of land. So it was conservation. That was one of the primary positive outcomes, but it also benefited the community. So I was looking for funders that support community health and recreation and youth. And then the third benefit was that it actually saved these very rare, very endangered bears. So I was looking for grantors that support wildlife. And that gave me a very different range, a much broader range than just focusing on one of those areas. So think broad as you're starting to search for grant making organizations. There we go. Lesson number 3, importantly, is that you need to assess the grant opportunity carefully before you invest. One of the things, one of my key messages for you is that you are a stakeholder for a grantor. They can't achieve their mission and their vision without you. And so if grants take time, your first question needs to be, does the potential benefit of this grant outweigh the cost of writing it? So is it worth the time? Is it worth the energy? Is it worth the administrative burden of implementing this project? And to help you do that, we're going to flip to how to assess a grant. So here are some key things that I want to ask before I even start writing. The first one is, how much can we ask for? You know, if I'm going to devote time to a $1,000 grant or a $100,000 grant, like, you know, that's kind of important. Can we or do we fit the criteria? What do they need to see in order for us to apply? So often they'll want to see CRA registration, insurance, audited financial, board signatures, work plan or budget, letters of support. Or if you're working in specialized groups or fields, you're working with heritage stuff, they'll want to see potentially some evaluations of the artifact that you're trying to acquire. Or in one instance, when we were working to secure funding to support an Indigenous project, we had to prove that we had had a number of meetings with all of the bands who were involved. These things all take time, and that's why it's important to think about the time that it would take to gather these, as well as whether or not the grant is worth it. Next is, do they fund operations or project management or overhead or salary? What are the reporting requirements? And then finally, is it worth it? So I've seen grants where we have to write an economic impact assessment for $10,000. They wanted to know how many jobs we created, what the impact was on the community. And when we added up the hours in terms of getting this out there, it just really wasn't worth it. So it's important to think about it and think about what those reporting requirements are and what the burden will be on your organization to honor the grant and the contract that you will sign. There we go. So lesson number 4. You'll notice in the picture, we say, I think we may need to update our disaster recovery plan. This one suggests we all run around in circles shouting, what do we do? What do we do? And it's true. Sometimes when you get a grant, that's exactly what happens. You're surprised that it had happened. Here's why this picture is relevant. You know, words matter a little when you're writing a grant, and pictures matter a little too. But the work plan and your budget and your metrics and your partnerships matter a lot more. So it's eye-opening how little words matter. And it's also really important to recognize that grant writing is collaborative. So you need to involve your programs person to come up with the project plan, and you need to involve your finance team to make sure that you are applying for enough resources to be effective in implementing this plan. Some tips for grant writing is to always watch videos and review the granting checklist and guidelines. If there is evaluation criteria embedded in these documents, pull it out and chart how your program compares. What I do in that case is I pull out all of the things that they're looking for. I put it into a table. It could be Excel or it could be Word, it doesn't really matter. And I start just bullet pointing, you know, so if they're asking about admin systems, I think about, well, we have a finance guy, we have a budget tracker, we have a receipting setup. Like, I think about all of those things that will help answer and support their evaluation of our program. Try to have a phone call with them to discuss the potential fit between your project and their organization. And finally, make it really simple for them and explain how you fit their criteria and fit their vision and support their mission. So to help you with this and to help you get ready to be successful, we've created a grant readiness checklist, which you're going to receive shortly. So here are some questions that I ask all the time. What's the problem? Why is this important? Why are we the ones that can solve this problem? That is really about figuring out who else is in the marketplace and how you are better positioned to support over others. What is the project that will help fix this issue? What is already in place? So we're talking here about, you know, have you got a project that's already up and running that's sort of bare bones and you need more resources? Is it about you have initial funding from X organization and you need more funding? That's also something that can come up quite often. Or is it a need that somebody's identified within the community and it's pressing and this is a pilot project? Those are all things that could apply to this question. And then the important one is, what will we use this new funding for? How would this new funding enhance what we're already doing? I feel like if I hit it about 5 times, it'll go through. Here's part 2. How will we implement the program? So that's your work plan. How much do we need and over how long? Who are the other potential funders and partners? What happens after the project is complete? This is about sustainability. So this is about, you know, how you're planning on rolling this into larger operations, or how you're planning on securing further funding to expand this project. It's basically a sustainability question. And then how will we report back to our funders on this initiative? And then finally, when I can get this through, the most important question you have to answer is, how does this project support the mission and vision of the foundation? So I actually do write this out. I will write out exactly what the criteria is within the mission and vision of the foundation. And then I'll go through our project and I'll pick out those words and those phrases and those goals for the project and chart those as well so that you know what your key lines are. The reason why this grant readiness checklist is a good idea is because you can use these to make a one-pager for your grants. And it can happen anytime. It can happen, 6 months before grants due, or, right after your budget or right before, like whenever this idea starts trickling, you can start gathering the data that you need. And then when a grant opportunity comes up, you have the backbone to start the grant writing process. And all what you'll really need to update are the work plans and the budgets, because those usually change over time. This is also a really great way to, if somebody comes to you and says, I think the study of unicorns is super fantastic and it's life-changing, you can say, great, here's a document that I need to fill out before we move forward with a grant writing opportunity. Can you help me do this? And then you can sort of identify where the gaps are in this list. So the last thing I've seen grants do, or one of the important things for a grant writing process, is all related to metrics. So, just so that we have all the same definitions, I would say that your goal is the ultimate outcome. So your objectives are the step along the way to help you achieve the goal, and your metrics are how you measure success. So let's say that here's an example for you. A goal is to make an environmentally conscious youth that are actively engaged in combating climate change. That's a goal. An objective would be to think about all of the steps along the way that will get you there. So some examples of objectives would be increasing the number of kids enrolled in climate change education programs, or increasing the number of awareness opportunities for these types of things, or increasing the numbers of dollars raised to help us implement this type of project. A metric would be to see an increased number of kids enrolled in climate change education. And then pick a number. So it could be increased by 10% number of children enrolled in climate change education. So that would say we have 30 kids enrolled now. We want to increase it by 10% by the end of 2021. That means I need to have 33 kids enrolled by the end of 2021. Just to give you an idea of what this looks like. There we go. Lesson number 5. And I love this photo because it's so true. Remember, no assumptions. So you don't know their process and they know nothing about your project or charity. Always explain who you are and how you fit. Always talk to them about the importance of your programs and how those fit, not only with who they are and what they're doing, but why it's important more generally. And I would say you want to find, I call it the frame. And so a frame is really about answering the so what question. And so when I think about a frame, I think of it as like a inverted triangle. So with the big chunk at the top, and I start with the global context, and then I'll talk about the regional context, and then I'll talk about the local context. And within that, I will bring it back to the foundation's mission and goals. So this is important stuff. It's really about answering so what. Like, and using information from other sources to prove that there is a problem. So you have to look at different reports to show that the problem statement is real, that the frame is a real issue, and talk about why it would matter. So here's an example of a frame. The Public Health Agency of Canada has noted, this is all, like I made this all up just so that we're totally aware this is not real. The PHAC has noted a 25% increase in the use of opioids year on year throughout Canada and declared a state of emergency. There's your national context. In the same report, PHAC notes that Alberta's year-on-year increase is notably higher. There's a 36% increase in usage. The report outlines communities of concern, which includes XYZ, where there is a 45% increase in opioid usage. That's provincial going into local. The 45% increase is substantial. The City of XYZ's economic impact report has already noted increased job losses, housing instability, health crises, mental health emergencies that impact individuals certainly, and already the community is suffering. Fewer connections, lower real estate prices, less economic growth. So then you could bring in, the funding organization. As a charity who supports economic impact analysis and understands the importance of mental health, we are asking you to join us in partnership to create lasting solutions and benefit the community of XYZ. Lesson number 6 is a fun one. It's really about answering everything that's in the application and being innovative and creative. So resist the urge to say, see above. You're going to end up with repeated questions. I remember answering one and it had like 6 questions all related to economic impact. So what I really wanted to do was to sit there and say, well, see above, see question number 3, see question number 3, see question number 3. But I didn't do that. The reason why is because these organizations are asking that question a million different ways to check for discrepancies. And they're also asking it because it really, really matters. So answer fully your whatever the question is, answer it fully, but then paste your answer in to the next question that's about the same topic and refresh it a little bit. Not only are they checking to make sure your numbers match, they're checking to make sure your reasoning matches too. So that's part of it. I thought it'd be fun to talk to you about some examples of how to do this, and to talk a little bit about what a ripple effect is. So one of the questions I got while we were building a trail that was, a 25-kilometer long trail was, what amount of greenhouse gas emissions will you be saving the world, basically? And I'm thinking, well, it's a trail. So, the obvious answer is a lot. But the less obvious answer was to do something called the ripple effect. So, and to think more broadly about what the benefit would be. So in this case, we sat there and we literally calculated the area of green space that the trail was preserving and figured out how to, assess the greenhouse gas savings that we would be finding there. And then we literally were like, well, the only other trail that's available that has the similar length is like 25 kilometers away. And so we're sitting there thinking, okay, well, 2 Subarus travel 50 kilometers round trip 3 times a week. And what are the greenhouse gas emissions from that kind of travel? And then we took the number from the green space that we preserved, plus the Subaru number, and we put it together and we explained to them how we got there. and we got the grant. So they thought it was a good answer, I guess. So when we're talking about a ripple effect, I think about it like, what is the immediate benefit of the project? What is the, who is indirectly affected by this project? And what is the regional benefit? So the reason why you want to do that is because it's not just the one person who was employed who received the benefits. So in this case, this is related to employment numbers. Our project has hired 12 people to work full-time positions throughout the summer. That's a direct benefit. There's 12 people who have jobs. Fantastic. On average, these workers are members of 4-person families, meaning that for every direct full-time position, 3 additional people experience benefits. And that's true. Like if there's full-time work in a household, that means, there's food on the table, there's maybe new clothes or a new bike or whatever. There's more power in those dollars and there's more security. So I can say that 36 additional people are indirectly impacted by this project. And then on top of it, you can look at the regional viewing. So in addition, these workers are injecting funding into local businesses that have been hard hit by the pandemic. We anticipate they are shopping at 5% of local businesses. So there are 250 local businesses in the last EIA survey, which means 12.5 businesses have been positively impacted. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because often you'll see grants that come in and it'll say, well, we're hiring 12 jobs. Well, that's true, but it's not the only impact. So think about the direct, the indirect, and the regional benefits for your project, and then go and explain to them very transparently how you came up with that information so that they understand your reasoning. If I were to say, well, we're going to benefit 1,080 people, they'd be like, whoa, where did you come up with that number? And that's a fair question. So it's always important to think about your work and to share your reasoning for how you got to that number, because they'll appreciate being able to follow that stuff. Number 7 is to focus on saving them time. Grantors and the people who read grants are very hardworking people who are bound to read every grant application that shows up on their desk, and that is a tough job. Certainly not one that's easy to do. So what I would suggest is that you try to meet with them. Keep your meetings short, productive, and professional. I'll explain more on that in a minute. Help them do their jobs by providing good answers to their granting questions. So it's really hard to do a good job when things aren't answered directly, or when it's sort of embedded within a lot of text. So think about how you're creating your content and how you're answering those questions and how you're explaining how you got to your numbers and what your plans are. If you have any questions, ask, and do so early. So not the night before a grant is due. I've been through an experience where literally everyone was uploading everything and we broke the Government of Canada's system. It was down for 2 days because we were all working to get everything in the day of the grant deadline, which I thought was pretty interesting. And so one more thing is to ask for feedback if a grant is declined. Make it clear that you're trying to learn how to do this better, and realize that they're doing a job and it's not personal. So how I get a meeting with a representative from a granting organization is to say, could I meet with you for 15 minutes? My goal is to clarify a few things to ensure our project fits your needs and vision for the future. The reason why I'm saying that in the not so subtle message is I want to help you do your job and make sure that I'm not wasting your time. So the thing about asking for feedback, and I've also lived this experience where we were denied funding for a project. And I called the woman because the executive director I was working with wanted to know why. And I swear she took the phone away from her ear and was just waiting for me to start yelling at her for not funding the grant. And so what I would say to her is, I'm just calling to get some feedback. It's my job to understand how we can improve. We respect your decision. We know that you have a lot on your plate and a lot of funding requests. And as soon as I said that, she calmed down and she gave me some really, really good feedback that helped us in our next grant. So, and we're going to move on a little bit to budgets. Lesson number 8 is don't bank your organization with a successful grant application, which is quite a statement when you think about it. So there's an old saying out there, which is the more projects you get, the more broke the organization becomes. And that can be true because for many organizations, we're really scared of actually providing a full costing budget. So full costing means you don't ask for less than what you need. You work with your finance team to come up with a full cost. You think about all of the things related to the project and all of the things that are required for operating the project. So some examples include phones, reporting, and operations. I'm going to show you a bit of a checklist. Now this is just stuff that's off the top of my head. This isn't everything that I would ask, but I would literally sit down with your finance person once you have the work plan and go through everything that's on there and start asking questions like, how many positions do we need? Have we included benefits, pension, and other costs? Do they need office space? What about a laptop? Do they need a phone plan? You know, if you're doing jobs, do we need to advertise? How much does that cost? Do we need HR support? Do we need promotion on Facebook or other sites? You know, what are the reporting requirements is a big one as well, because a reporting requirement, you know, who will do this? Who's going to take on this work? Do we need to hire somebody to do it, or can we just put it out there and get it done? So, and then what other costs need to be accounted for? And so my story for you on this is I was working with an organization. We needed cell phones and we needed laptops because we were sending people away to work during COVID, which was great. We got $14,000 to pay for these things. What we forgot though was phone plans. And we forgot we needed those. And so luckily we were able to go back to the grantor and say, can we reallocate things within here so that the organization is not taking on a $6,000, I think, cost for cell phones. And so we were able to figure it out and reevaluate how many phones we needed and what else was there. So here's an example of a budget that we put together. You'll see that I wanted to show you what we've learned over time. So what we asked for is the column and the amount, the dollar amount that we asked for. What we should have asked for is what I wish we'd asked for, frankly, and what the difference is. And so you can see, if I could have done it again, I would have asked for 20% of total costs rather than 10% for admin. So that was an $8,000 difference. There was no travel costs associated in the budget the first time around, but we didn't realize that actually there were 2 trips a week that needed to be taken. And so that was a $10,000 cost that we needed to figure out. We had $15,000 for advertising and tablets, that stayed the same. We needed funding for elders, that also stayed the same. We didn't include anything for rent and utilities in this case, but we could have. And that office space for the contractor could have been valued at $5,000, which would have supported the organization. And instead, the organization had to cover that cost. And then we applied for salaries, which was $48,000, but we should have applied for salaries and benefits, which was actually $60,000. So in total, we asked for $79,000. We should have asked for $114,000. That means that the organization had to either assume $35,000 worth of cost or find a different funder to take on those needs. Lesson 9 is to track and monitor your grants. So what I've done is, and what we've done is provide you with a skeleton spreadsheet for how to do this. So when you're, Christopher Columbus out there finding grants, do yourself a favor and gather all of that information into one document that can be shared amongst you and your team, whomever is responsible for grants, and track all of the grants that are available, so that you're constantly on it and you're constantly adding to it, and you can see what's due in October and what's due in January. It'll just make your life so much easier, and it will help you diversify the number of grants that you apply for so that your success rate will go up. The next lesson really is about stewarding your grant relationships as much as donor relationships. So again, one of my main key messages for you is that you are a stakeholder and you are essential to the foundation or the granting organization to achieve their vision and mission. They are actually very much invested in your success. So make sure that you're reporting regularly. Come to them with issues. Tell them how you want to fix the problem, whatever that is. They will accommodate, usually, as much as they can. They never want the money back, and they within reason, obviously, but they definitely want to see this project successful because you are the stakeholder that is making their vision come to fruition. And then, so that's pretty much the story. Here are the 10 lessons learned one more time. So I think you'll get them, but there you go. And then, yeah, I think that concludes. Oh, and then some helpful links. So here's some reports for you, some resources, some free newsletters, some great conferences, some blogs that are awesome and quite funny. And thank you so much. And Moza, what do I have to do? I have to make you the host, don't I?
Yeah, no, I'm the host. I think everyone can hear me. So it's just,
okay.
Stop sharing your screen if you could, if you haven't already. I think you've got that. So I think everyone can see us. Well, thank you very much for that, Emily. We really appreciate you sharing all those valuable insights on researching and applying for grants. I just want to point out, in case anyone's not aware, that KEA Canada is based here in the Bow Valley. And if you want to learn more about them, their website is keacanada.com. And we'll be sending out all those details in an email, a follow-up email as well. So don't worry about that. And if anyone has any questions for Emily or they want to learn more about what she does, you can reach out to her. Her contact details will be in the handouts. I've left a link to that in the chat box, but again, we'll be sending those out by email. We do have one question here. I'm just seeing if any new ones have been added. The question we had was a little bit, well, it wasn't necessarily a nonprofit. So you deal primarily with nonprofits. Is that right, Emily? Profit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me just go back here. So the question is from Yuka. I'm a registered for-profit business owner without a nonprofit status. What would be the best approach to apply for funding for community development focused activities? If no direct granting is available, is there support? Or do you need to become a nonprofit to access funding? I think we can, Yuka, I'll take that question offside with you. I think we're going to be having a chat soon, so I can help you with that. I know there are grants available for organizations that aren't nonprofits, but since that's our focus today, that's kind of what we're focusing on. So let me just see, there is a question here from Marion. Is there a standard definition on what is included in the grant section called admin? I sometimes struggle with this. Do you have any thoughts on that, Emily?
I think it's a good thing if there maybe isn't a standard, because that allows you to think about what your project needs. So, you know, for me, I will think about admin and actually, I think there's maybe two answers. So sometimes you'll end up with an admin suggestion, which will include like paper, printing, pencils, you know, marketing, that kind of thing. That can be one category. And that's okay. And then the other one that I think is important for admin is thinking about project management and reporting and HR, you know, if that's something that's part of your project, or even marketing or promotion. Probably the best thing would be to keep a running list of those things and then look at the grant to see which ones are most important for you. So sorry, it's not a better answer.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Emily. I've got another question here from Denise. I'm interested in learning about how you apply for grants that require matching funding. How do you manage the granting applications to obtain larger matching grant, for example, government grants of 25,000 or more?
Well, oh, that's such a good question. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. One is if you do have unrestricted dollars that you can put towards the matching portion, that's you know, an easy way to do it. Another way is to value, per the granting guidelines, the contributions that the organization itself is making. So if you're allocating a portion of the full-time equivalent towards this role, that's a contribution. So, you know, if it's 0.5 FTE of a $50,000 role, well, you know, magic, you're giving $25,000. You just, again, need to be very transparent about how you're getting to that number.
Fantastic, thank you. I've got a question from Michelle. Is there a reasonable percentage of admin costs that donors like to see on projects? These tend to be higher when launching a new program.
Also a really good question. Oh my goodness. So Michelle, one thing I recommend is that you sign up for the KEA Canada newsletter. A lot of our focus is actually on marrying finance and fundraising together and figuring out a way to come up with an admin range that works for an organization, and also trying to influence that discussion among our peer institutions and organizations. What we've seen recently in the Government of Canada, there's a Senate committee report that is a link that's included in this presentation, and they talk about the importance of including administrative costs, you know, as a rule across all projects that are funded by the Government of Canada. That was in the Senate report. The Government of Canada came back and said, yeah, actually, we will do that for you. So I don't know if there's a right answer. I mean, I think you need to figure out what's best for your organization and explain to them why your admin rates are maybe higher than they would like to see. Of course, you know, they'd love to see you know, a straight 20% or 10% or whatever, but that's just not reality. And the truth is that it's okay to explain why your rates are higher. And you can even, if I were you, I would be using the Government of Canada Senator report to explain why you're higher and why the government supports higher admin rates.
Fantastic. That's a wonderful answer. I think that's it. Oh, let's see. Just a few comments from Ruth there, just supporting what you're saying. I think that might be all the questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to finish there with, Emily?
No, I just would say thank you for making time for me. If you need anything, my contact information is on the handouts. And feel free to reach out to us anytime. We are based in Canmore and we'd love to help.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Emily. I really appreciate it. If you found today's webinar helpful, register for our next speaker series on May 25th. That's going to be with Kathy Arney, also from KEA Canada, and she's going to be talking about grant strategy. So it's really taking what Emily's been sharing with us today and taking it to the next level. You'll also want to save the dates June 22nd, when we'll be joined by Afton Brazzoni from Scribe National to learn about content strategy and writing. And on July 27th, Jenny Spur from Perch Communications will share her insights on communications planning. And finally, please fill in the 3-question survey after the webinar. It's super helpful. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And thanks again, Emily, for your time and effort and all your valuable insights.
We'll
Bye,
see you
everyone.
all. Thanks.